When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow.
Welcome to the OShow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. I'm your host, Laura Babcock, and joining me again today is one of the most opinionated people in the country. So much so that he was renowned for it when he was a member of Parliament for many years. But after he left politics, Charlie Angus, as you know, has taken up the mantle as the leader of the resistance in this country, even doing a tour across our great nation, talking to people about the risk of the Trump administration to Canada, of MAGA. And, you know, Charlie, I had you on the show a little while ago before the end of the election, I think. And at the time, everything was elbows up, elbows up. And then Carney was elected, and people kind of feel like, do we still need to have our elbows up? So, welcome to the O Show. And can we start there? Do we need our elbows up? What is the threat assessment from your point of view? And tell me a little bit about the resistance tour.
Well, I'll start with the tour. I'm getting calls from all over the country to come and speak and hold rallies and help organize grassroots resistance. So just this past week, I was in Picton, packed house on a Monday night in beautiful little Picton at the Regent Theatre. I was in Kingston. I'll be in Guelph. I'm getting requests for Manitoba, for Vancouver. I just got one for Montreal, Nova Scotia, Owen Sound. I mean, people from all over are calling on me to come and help frame the times that we're living in. So that tells me that people are not dropping their guard. I think it's really important that we have to think of this as the threat to freedom is not that we're just going to be able to go back to normal and that Donald Trump's going to pick on somebody else. We are in the age of gangster oligarchs. So maybe there's a lull, like a phony war, but the threat doesn't stop. And I think a lot of ordinary Canadians get that. And I think ordinary Canadians are worried that we will lull ourselves into thinking we can go back to normal with a gangster fascist regime on our border. And then we'd get sucker punched again. We are still deeply being impacted by the tariff wars. We're seeing huge job threats right now in the auto sector. On the other hand, the Americans are set to lose $12.5 billion in travel from Canada and from Europe this year. So, like, we're slugging it out in a really stupid ring with a toxic thug. But the larger questions of how do we defend democracy, how do we defend our beliefs of fairness in this age of gangster oligarchy, I think that's the question for the time. And I don't want to let anyone figure that they can just leave it to a politician to decide our future. We have to take that in hand ourselves.
Well, you make an excellent case. And for those of us who are obsessed, I'll admit it, with what happens in America, because I'm a strategist and I want to know what's coming. And so what's coming is what's happening down there. The threats that they make, the way that the narrative evolves and changes. I mean, we had the FBI director blaming all the drugs on Canada now and talking about, you know, we've seen people posting that Canada is now a threat to the United States. These all sound like narratives, like propaganda, laying the groundwork for more than maybe a trade war. And I asked you this last time, and I'll ask it to you again. You know, I don't ever want to be on the side of paranoia, Charlie, but
Yep.
I also feel like we have the longest undefended border in the world, right? I've got family in Florida and Cleveland. I care deeply about the erosion of rights in the United States and the lack of rule of law that we're seeing, the suspension of habeas corpus, the disappearing of people, the arresting of judges, and now an actual congressperson with charges. I mean, it feels it's dystopic to watch it, but it's also real. So, I mean, is your threat assessment at the level that this is not just them messing with us and rhetoric and trying to hurt our economy? Do you think that there is somewhere in that manifest destiny, spheres of influence theory, real harm planned for Canada?
Well, I think we have to ask why Trump has actually presented himself as a sock puppet for Vladimir Putin. I think people think of that as, well, he's obviously got a lot of dirt on Donald, and I'm sure there's a lot of dirt, and I'm sure we don't even want to know what that dirt is. We wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But it misses the larger question, which is, this isn't the fact that the United States, leader of the free world, has caved to a dictator. It's that both Putin's Russia
Mhm.
and America today are oligarchic states.
Right.
Um, And I think that that's really important. I mean, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, and they talked about the end of history and the defeat of communism, there was a belief then that there was no alternative but capitalism, and capitalism would somehow bring open markets, and open markets would bring democracy. But then the people started to make more and more money, realized to hell with democracy. We don't need democracy. I mean, Peter Thiel, Palantir says the same thing. Elon Musk believes that. And so you have a gangster oligarch regime in Russia, and you have a gangster oligarch regime in the United States. The democratic rights of Americans are undermined all the time. Now we're just seeing it being in your face with the threats to, arrest of judges, mayors, Congress people. So if we look at the playbook that happened in Russia, I mean, it began with Vladimir Putin saying there wasn't a real border. It began with Vladimir Putin saying, the Ukrainians weren't a real nation. Nobody believed that he would bomb Kiev. It just seemed impossible in 2021. Just like in January 2022, when the threats began with Donald Trump, there were a lot of Canadian leaders who were saying, well, he's being Trump. And, we got this bozo, this guy, former Biden ambassador to Canada, saying, oh, Canada overreacted. Like, go back to Washington, you goof. Like, we overreacted when they threatened our nation. We overreacted when they said they were going to crush our economy. So we are dealing now with a nation where, okay, this guy was a Biden guy. He's not standing up and saying, yeah, this is really outrageous what Trump's doing. He's saying, boy, Canada, why are you guys standing up to him? The short of all that is that right now, as long as we keep staying really firm, it rattles the Americans. And so they're less sure that they can take us down. And I think if we put our guard down, I don't know where it goes from here, but we're looking at if you can arrest Congress people and judges in their courtrooms, then anything becomes possible.
Yeah, I saw some large account on X make the comment that Canadian legislators should be arrested or whatever, and I answered with a hearty "fuck you," which got I think over 100,000 or more responses. I mean, if you can't use salty language when people are threatening your country and your freedoms, when do you use it, Charlie? And
Well, okay, so I can use it because that was my comment. I was telling that guy to fuck right back to Washington. But again, I'm just going to do my Canadian media rant, right? I mean, we shouldn't be ranting about our nation's media. We all got to rally around them, but they've missed the moment again and again and again. I am on American media way more than I have ever been on Canadian. It's like they don't want to talk about this. So what? We got to read about an American diplomat getting headlines that we overreacted, and that's our coverage of this. I think it's that he said, she said journalism that fails in the age of oligarchy, and the age of like the kind of punking of the public that Trump and MAGA engage in. They're getting a laugh at us, and our media are not helping us. So your show, certain American podcasts, that's where people are turning to now, because ordinary people know this is not normal. This is not right. And who's standing up and talking about defense of Canada? Who's talking about the real threat? You're not hearing that from our little group of pundits who watch the drama show on the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, right? It's like the high school newspaper writing about the favorite couples who show up at the prom. Meanwhile, we're being threatened at the future of our nation, and so we need voices. That's maybe one reason people are coming out to see me. I mean, why me? I don't know. I'm just trying to frame the language, but obviously there's a need to frame the language of threat and then language of response. I mean, that's why you're doing what you're doing, and that's why you're having me on the show, and that's why people are paying attention.
I don't pretend to be a journalist anymore, Charlie, but I do understand that much of Canadian media is now owned by an American hedge fund, right? So whenever I see headlines that are downplaying the threat from Trump or mocking, that elbows up response, or putting forward harmful narratives about Canada that serve only for the people who would like to hurt us, I call it out and say, MAGA American-owned newspaper says what now? I mean, just so that people start to have a critical lens about what media we do consume in this country. And then you've got other media, to your point, that he said, she said phenomenon, That's, it's equal on both sides. When I was a journalist, that wasn't what it was. It was talk to multiple sources to find the truth and report
Yeah,
that
yeah.
with the best view of your own bias and removing those lenses as best you can. There's a reason why the Midas Touch has you on in the U.S. They are the #1 YouTube show in politics in the world now. Congratulations to the Marcellus brothers. They had on the OShow when I was interviewing Bruce Vanjoy. It's a major American pro-democracy network that is getting popular around the world and in Canada, because they are speaking facts and truth all day long to combat the MAGA propaganda machine. What are some of those key ideas or thoughts or language that's out there that truly are propaganda, that people in Canada see it and it might just go over their heads because they don't have the radar that you and I might have? What comes to mind, Charlie, that people should be wary of?
Well, the obvious one is now suddenly we have this threat to break up our country, right? We're facing the biggest threat our nation has ever seen, and suddenly the National Post, Calgary Herald, Edmonton Journal, the if there ever was a case for AI, I mean, I don't know why you have like Lauren Gunter and Rick Bell and Don Braid, because it's the same article. I think AI would be cheaper, but suddenly they're driving this agenda about how Alberta is going to, has been attacked and undermined by Canada. I was just in Alberta at one of the resistance tours. I mean, you're not going to find people more loving and believing in Canada than in Alberta, but you're also not going to find people who have the same level of the wealth and opportunity that exists in Alberta. And yet suddenly they are this victim, and Danielle Smith is driving this campaign. So she was down at Mar-a-Lago, not with Team Alberta, but with Kevin O'Leary, hanging out with Trump, hanging out with Ben Shapiro, hanging out with people, Tucker Carlson, who talked about invading Canada, doing shows with them. And now suddenly we're treating this Alberta separatist movement as though it was a legitimate, important discussion. So on the one hand, you have CBC wringing their hands and doing, heading out there and doing call-in shows and talking about, maybe the rest of the country needs to understand how, we haven't built enough pipelines, we haven't given big oil enough money. CBC is really trying to come to terms with it because what? Because the MAGA crew are saying it's a big issue. But on the other hand, I just wrote about this in my Substack. Uh, Rick Bell from Calgary Herald does a big profile of the guy who's going to lead Alberta sovereignty, as they call it. And this guy's basically promoting that the Holocaust and the treatment of the 6 million murdered Jews is the same as how Canada deals with Alberta.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And he never said anything about that. And the
Yeah.
Calgary Herald never said anything about that. And the National Post never said anything about that. And Danielle Smith has never denounced it because this guy is one of her key. He's on the Riding Association. So they're promoting people who are comparing Canada's relationship to our richest province with the murder of the Jews.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it tells me that there's no red lines anymore in the attack on destroying our country. And
Yeah.
it's going to be led by, again, a newspaper chain that we allowed to take over all of our great local newspapers. And it's a Republican hedge fund in the United States.
Right.
And so they've set the standard now, and it's wherever you look, National News Watch, all my local papers, those voices are driving an agenda to break up our country. And nobody's calling it out. I mean,
You know what? It's interesting because well, obviously we have on the OShow
yeah,
and many times, and even the separation. I mean, I just get to the habit now. I think people are still learning, Charlie. I think people feel
mm,
a great sense of relief about the election to a certain extent, even
yeah,
if they weren't a liberal. I'm not a liberal, but I was pro Carney because I didn't want Polyev. I didn't want the adjacency to MAGA anywhere near leading my country, right? So I think a lot of people put their past loyalties aside and said, we need to make sure that Canada is as protected as we can in this moment. And then we saw, US News covers it that Canada voted against Trump. And then we saw in Australia voted against Trump. And we just saw in Romania voted against Trump. So this is being seen as countries waking up to the threat,
hmm
even if they're not directly on that giant border like we are. But what I am in the habit of doing now is when I spot MAGA propaganda, I just, play in that wretched space of X because that's where most of it is coming in. And I just say, this is MAGA propaganda. Like,
yeah,
let's just help people educate to what this is. If it's going to hurt the country, if it is saying that we are bringing in all kinds of drugs to the US, which is factually untrue compared to where they get it elsewhere, right? When we see them make claims about fentanyl, when we see them make claims about Alberta separation, or about how Canada is unsustainable as a nation, or about how the people in this country are miserable, all things that we know are factually inaccurate. They are meant to weaken us. And
Hmm.
I have been very angry at Danielle Smith, whether she's covering up for her own corrupt care scandal using the separation thing, or whether there's some more nefarious agenda at play, to be challenging the integrity of our country's structure when we're under pressure from a foreign threat. I think is despicable. I haven't used the word traitor or treasonous. To me, that's a high bar for things. But I really feel as though people who are actively harming Canada when we're under attack really need to examine why they're doing it. It might be that they're not intending to. They don't realize it. They just have grievances, or they're upset about the election. But you really got to think. We've all been in a situation where there's a big bully in the schoolyard, and the only way to deal with the bully is to get your friends together and stand up against the bully, right? So to your point, Charlie, every time that we stand up, every time that we push
Hmm.
back, every time that we cut off trade to the US, these are signals that Canada is not going to roll over. And you had a video that I loved where you were in Kingston and you told the story, and I'd love it just to, for the sake of our audience who might be feeling stressed by this conversation. Can you just summarize what the message was in that video about Kingston's role in our history with the US?
Well, yeah, I mean, history doesn't matter until it does, and suddenly history really matters with Canada, right? And so I remember 2012, Stephen Harper was really trying to promote the War of 1812, and nobody was buying it. Even people who were military historians were like, what are we talking about here? Because at that time we were dealing with idle no more and Harper's refusal to deal with the indigenous frustration and anger. And, of course, he didn't want to admit that there wouldn't be a Canada if it wasn't for the indigenous leadership like Tecumseh, who broke the Americans at the Fort Detroit. That was the key battle in the War of 1812. So at that time, 13 years ago, we weren't really putting our heads around the War of 1812 because we had our own issues. And at that time, we thought as if America would ever threaten us again. But here we are today. So I was just down at the port in Kingston near Fort Henry and thinking about that, when 7 American gunships came to take Kingston. And they always talked it was British, but it was local militias from Frontenac, Lennox, Addington who came down and defended the shores. And they were also joined by a regiment called the Newfoundland Fencibles. So here was Canada at that time defending one of our key then military garrisons, now one of our most beautiful communities. And so now suddenly we think, well, what would happen again? I mean, we already have them threatening us on the Great Lakes. We have them threatening Donald Trump when he met with Carney. He didn't say no 51st. He said never say never. The guy's a sexual predator. Sexual predators don't believe such things as no means no, and Donald Trump doesn't believe never means never. He didn't back off at all.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to think, here's a beautiful Canadian city. What would happen if the Americans came? And then to be at a rally in Kingston and think, what would happen? Just like it happened the last time. These are people who are going to stand up because they stand up for our values. They stand up for our country, and they are not going to be pushed around by the bigger threat. So I'm hoping we don't have to go down and burn the White House down a second time, but we will do what we've got to do in the meantime, which is to defend democracy and defend truth in the face of them.
When I'm watching what's happening in the US, my best theory of the case is that the American people themselves are anti-king, they're
Hmm.
revolutionaries in their nature, more than we are, Charlie.
Yeah.
That's their history, is to fight back against anything that takes away their freedoms or taxation without representation. So now they're going to be in a situation where they're getting crushed. They are getting crushed with all their social entitlement programs that they paid into. They're being taken away from them. Their jobs are being taken away, their health care, their safety as a society in terms of pandemic monitoring and all the rest of it. I mean, they are really headed
Yeah.
for hell.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that the June 14th No Kings protest might hit a critical mass that changes the conversation in the US to more of what we're seeing in Belgrade and Serbia. I mean, do you think that the American people are going to be the ticket to bringing this regime, if not under control, under heel somehow, by just saying you can't take away what we fought for originally from the king?
Well, really, I think, important for Canadians to realize um, the role that Canada has played in terms of giving backbone to the rest of the world.
Mhm.
The fact that we stood up and the fact that, our boycott came in so strong and so determined and at such a grassroots level is being noticed. The fact that, Prime Minister Trudeau did stand up right away and threw back counter tariffs when, poor Keir Starmer was like stumbling around and the Europeans were still not sure. And I say this because I get messages every day from all over the world who are watching Canada. And I'm speaking more and more with Americans who were so shell shocked and so frightened and disoriented in the first 3 months. And they have a lot of reason to be that. But now I'm getting a sense of a rising determination and grassroots response. And a lot of the work I do in the resistance is try and amplify the stories of local people and ordinary people who are standing up in the face of tyranny. And the messages I get from the states often end with elbows up. They see Canada came together. They saw that we had a common language about resistance that was determined, particularly Canadian, and kind of fun and in your face. And it's been really helpful. So we have a much bigger fight ahead of us. I think we are in this. It's going to be an ugly, awful slog about war, and this is why I get really frustrated by those. You don't call them traitors, but I think they're not. They're not fooling around. They're trying to break our country because the oligarchs can't win if Canada stays strong because we are a democratic nation, whereas they're taking away their democracy. We believe in inclusion while they're attacking, diversity. So Canada is a threat to them by our very being, by just being a good, decent neighbor. We become a threat to them because they can't tolerate that. So as long as we hold the line, it makes, I think, it a lot easier for Americans to say, well, geez, we can do it too. And I never thought I'd be in a situation where I thought Americans would be looking to us on how to defend democracy, but their democracy is seriously under threat right now. And I'm doing everything I can. I just was asked to go down to North Carolina and to New York, and I said I'd love to go, but I don't want to end up in an El Salvadorian prison camp. So
Kidding.
so
Or
so you
Libya,
guys,
or
yeah,
Libya, for Christ's
or
sake.
Libya or South Sudan. I said, so you guys do what you got to do, and we'll do what we've got to do, and maybe someday we'll be able to cross the border and celebrate together. But we're not at that point yet.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. And you know what? You couldn't pay me to step
Mm,
foot in Trump's
Yep.
regime, in Trump's
Yep.
America. It's terrifying.
Yep.
Charlie, you said something I think there that is a real takeaway for me is that it's not just about putting our elbows up or pushing back against propaganda when we see it or demanding that our media get its shit together, which it needs to do. Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
But it's also our values. By
Hmm.
maintaining our values, meaning a pluralistic, small L liberal democracy, by standing up for the rights of others, for for being inclusive, these things, it's not about woke, it's about Canadians' values. They've
Yeah,
always been
it's
our
who we
values.
are as a nation, and that's what we will not let them take away from us. And that is, and wherever I go talking about the resistance, that is what gets the biggest response. Canadians know what decency means. It also, Canadians know that we've done a lot of wrong things, and we're going to fix that. And we're on this road to reconciliation, but we're not going to let gangsters come in and walk over our flag and over this growing conversation about what it means to be an inclusive, diverse nation of settlers, indigenous, all our squabbles that we love to squabble. That's our right. We can squabble, but don't come in and mess on our turf because we will stand as one, and that's what I'm getting a sense of right across the country.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. And I'm thankful that you're doing the tour, that you're taking on the label of leading the resistance, because it, for some people, they think it sounds whatever. I think it sounds exactly spot on for what we need.
I'm just doing it, and I keep saying I'm not the resistance you are. I'm just amplifying it back to you. I'm talking and giving language, but the people are the resistance, and
So I
that's a
have to
great thing.
I have to ask, because of course, when you exhibit good Canadian values like what you're doing, the cynics assume I'm getting paid for everything that I'm doing to stand up for Canada. How is it that you're managing this tour with all these requests? Is it funded by the local requesters? Is it something that, like, I ask it, Charlie, because if people think that it is some sort of a profit initiative, it doesn't have the same resonance as if you're doing it for the same motivations that
We're
I'm
we're
doing the show.
we're a small team. There's three of us. It's becoming pretty much full-time work.
I
Just
know, yeah, that's what I'm.
getting up. I mean, I'm writing an essay a day. I've written an essay a day for over 100 days. That's I'm cramming continually. It varies. We need to be able to drive to a place to the gas to be able to answer the phones. So it varies. Local communities, pass the hat. People, sell tickets. But it's all about making it so that, I don't have a budget to do it. But if you want me to come, if you got an on the ground team, we will go. We're getting some pretty out of the way places that are saying we want you. And we're trying to figure out how do we do it, but we'll figure a way to do it.
Charlie, thank
Yeah.
you in this incredibly busy schedule that you have standing up for our democracy, for spending some time with the OShow. I'd love to have you back to touch in at another point in this, but keep up the fight, my friend. As I said to you,
Elbows up.
yeah, elbows up. And as I said to you at the end of the last show, fucking A.
Fucking A. Yeah, fucking A. I know.
Fucking A. You keep going, my friend.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks to everyone who subscribes, shares the pod. Let's keep the pro-democracy movement growing in this country. We need, as Charlie Angus just said, to have the conversation, to unite, and to talk about ways that we can continue to protect Canada and make it better.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the OShow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the OShow. It's the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. And with a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the OShow. Yeah, there's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the OShow. You gotta stand for something or fall for it all. Canada, you hear the call of the OShow. It's a podcast, the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. Stay informed with the OShow, OShow.
Your merch band.